Sometimes I tried to speak and ended up embarrassing myself in front of others. There were moments when I wanted to stop speaking altogether because I was afraid of sounding foolish. But over time, I realized something that changed everything for me. Mistakes were not my enemies. They were my best teachers. Every single time I made an error, I was one step closer to understanding. Every wrong word was a lesson disguised as failure. In the beginning, I used to take every mistake personally. I thought they showed how bad I was at learning, how far I still had to go. But the truth is, mistakes are proof that you are trying. They are the footprints of progress. If you never make mistakes, it means you're not challenging yourself enough. I started noticing that every successful learner I admired once spoke broken English too. They weren't born fluent. They became fluent through trial and error. That realization gave me strength. It taught me to stop hiding from my imperfections and start learning from them. There was a time when I joined an online group to practice English. During my first conversation, I froze. My mind went blank. My accent sounded strange, and I mixed up my tenses. People corrected me kindly, but I still felt embarrassed. That night, instead of quitting, I wrote down every mistake I made. I practiced those corrections until I could say them confidently. The next time I spoke, I made fewer mistakes, but still plenty. Again, I took notes, practiced, improved. This process repeated for months. Gradually, I noticed something beautiful. My mistakes started becoming smaller, and my confidence grew stronger. Mistakes have a secret quality. They make your learning real. Reading books and memorizing rules can give you knowledge, but making mistakes gives you experience. You can read about swimming for years, but until you jump into the water, you'll never know how to swim. Learning a language is the same. You can study grammar forever, but unless you use it, you won't grow. Every mistake I made while speaking was like taking a step deeper into the water. It was scary at first, but with time, it became natural. I also learned to laugh at myself. When I mispronounced a word or said something completely wrong, I stopped feeling ashamed. I laughed, corrected myself, and moved on. That small change in attitude made learning so much easier. When you are afraid of mistakes, you build walls around your mind. But when you accept them, those walls disappear, and your mind becomes free to grow. The less afraid I became, the faster I learned. Confidence didn't come from perfection, it came from acceptance. There were times I would record myself speaking just to hear my own mistakes. I hated it at first because it exposed every weakness in my pronunciation and tone. But the more I listened, the more I understood what needed fixing. I treated every recording like feedback from a teacher. Slowly, I began noticing improvements I hadn't seen before. My tongue moved more naturally, my sentences flowed better, and my voice sounded more confident. The same thing that once embarrassed me became my greatest tool for growth. Another thing I discovered was that mistakes are not permanent. A mistake you make today can become your strength tomorrow. Once, I used to mix up and constantly. It frustrated me to the point where I thought I would never fix it. But because I focused on that mistake so much, I became extra careful. Eventually, I stopped making that error altogether, and now it feels effortless. What was once my weakness turned into one of my most reliable skills. That's the power of learning from mistakes. They shape you, polish you, and turn you into someone more capable than before. I noticed that children learn faster than adults, not because they are smarter, but because they are not afraid of being wrong. They try, fail, laugh, and try again. Adults, on the other hand, fear judgment. That fear is what stops them from improving. The moment I let go of that fear, learning became joyful again. I didn't care if my accent wasn't perfect, or if I used the wrong tense. I cared only about expressing myself, and that freedom made all the difference. Sometimes people corrected me in ways that felt harsh, but even that helped me grow. I learned to listen without taking offense. Every correction was a gift, not an insult. I began to thank people for pointing out my mistakes instead of feeling hurt. Once I adopted this mindset, I realized that making mistakes in public is one of the fastest ways to learn. When you face embarrassment once, you rarely repeat that same error again. Over time, I built a relationship with my mistakes. I stopped running from them and started walking beside them. They became my companions on the journey, guiding me quietly. Every time I made one, I reminded myself that I was still moving forward. It didn't matter how many times I failed, as long as I didn't stop learning from each failure. When I started learning English, I thought fluency meant using big words and perfect grammar. I believed that if I could memorize thousands of words and sound smart, people would think I was good at English. But the more I studied, the more I realized that real communication isn't about showing how much you know. It's about making people understand what you mean. It's about connecting, not impressing. In the beginning, I focused too much on being correct, and that pressure made me hesitate every time I tried to speak. I would think about grammar, pronunciation, sentence structure, and by the time I was ready to say something, the moment had already passed. I wasn't communicating, I was performing. There came a moment when I met a traveler who spoke broken English, but spoke it confidently. His grammar was wrong. His sentences were short, but everyone listened to him. He used gestures, expressions, and emotion. He didn't worry about mistakes, and people understood him easily. That was when I understood something powerful. Communication isn't about words, it's about connection. You can speak with perfect grammar and still fail to connect, or you can speak simply and touch hearts. From that day on, I stopped chasing perfection and started focusing on clarity. I wanted people to feel what I was saying, not just hear the words. I began listening more than speaking. I paid attention to how people expressed ideas, how they used tone, pauses, and emotion. I noticed that good communicators don't always use complex language. They use human language. When they speak, their words have life. I started practicing that. I began to focus on expressing ideas, emotions, and stories instead of just forming sentences. I asked myself, what am I really trying to say? That question changed my entire way of learning. I realized that learning a language is not about memorizing lines from a book. It's about finding your voice in that language. Sometimes I would have conversations with people who spoke very little English. Yet we could talk for hours, laughing and understanding each other through gestures and simple words. On the other hand, I met people who spoke perfectly but couldn't hold a real conversation because they were afraid of saying something wrong. I used to be like that, trapped in my fear of judgment. But when I started focusing on communication instead of perfection, something changed inside me. I began to enjoy speaking. I stopped worrying about being right and started thinking about being real. That small shift made my English come alive. I practiced speaking naturally, as if I was talking to a friend. I stopped translating every sentence from my native language and started thinking directly in English. It felt uncomfortable at first, but slowly, my thoughts began to flow more freely. I realized that the goal of learning a language isn't to sound perfect. It's to be understood, to connect, to express. A person who can communicate ideas clearly